Hey there, welcome back. So today is a pathology, wildlife pathology video, and I thought I would start with three cases, and they're going to be three bird cases that was seen over the summer. Now, I want to really reiterate that these animals were wild animals. They were sampled from Atlantic Canada. I am not going to be sharing any sensitive information, and this is for educational purposes only. And the reason why I'm saying this is that there are some sensitive information, and you should always be aware of these when dealing with animals. Now, because this is wildlife, we don't have owners or anything like that to worry about, but we still have some people, either people who have found these animals or people who's um, not understanding wildlife have compromised these animals. So it is sensitive, but I think that it is important to talk about these cases sometimes just to get some knowledge out there for the general public. Or if you are interested in pathology, well, this is a good way for you to hear from a veterinary student perspective and not necessarily someone who knows, have years of experience for this. So kind of segueing on what I just said, I am not a professional. I am not a pathologist. I will be discussing these things as I recall them. So there is potentially some things that I don't recall perfectly because I didn't take notes of this. This is from my memory and it's from my own understanding. So maybe there are some terminology that are not going to be exact. There's also a possibility that I say things aren't correct, and I encourage, if anyone is watching and wants to correct me on anything, feel free to do so. I mean, it's a learning opportunity here. These cases that I'm doing, like pathology cases that I want to do with you guys, there are learning opportunities for people who have the interest. So without further ado, let's go right into it. The first case that I want to talk to you guys about is a case that's called Bumblefoot. For anyone who doesn't know what Bumblefoot means, it's basically just a word that we use for an infection of a foot. It does occur in rodents, and it occurs in birds. So the actual term for it is pododermatitis, podo meaning foot, dermatitis meaning skin, itis meaning inflammation. So it is the inflammation of the skin of the foot. Um, a lot of the times, bumblefoot in birds is caused by a bacteria called staph. Um, in this case, it wasn't proven to be staph. Staph aureus is the full name of the bacteria that usually is known to cause these infections. So this owl was a barred owl coming from New Brunswick, and it was given to us, donated to us by the Fish and Wildlife in New Brunswick for educational purposes. So this owl was looked at in the postmortem room through a rotation, a wildlife rotation for veterinary students. So the very interesting thing about this owl is the first thing that we noticed about the foot was that it seemed to have been pierced. So there seemed to have been some trauma to the foot, and then there was a lot of swelling around the foot. Um, it was a little difficult to really have a really good assessment of the foot itself because the carcass wasn't fresh. The owl had died after being picked up by a ranger, and it had been frozen. So we weren't able to really see the redness just from the outside, but we did notice some swelling and trauma to the foot. Cutting into the foot, There was definitely a lot of edema, so a lot of swelling and some redness. So they took some samples and sent them to um, histology. So there were some samples taken to be able to look under the microscope, and there was also some samples sent to bacteriology to see if they could culture any organism from that trauma. They did culture an organism. Staph aureus did come up as one of the organism. However, I guess that's something I should have mentioned earlier, but Staph aureus is an organism that lives on normal skin. So it is a normal skin flora. However, it's an opportunistic bacteria. So if you have trauma like this owl did, it can get into a wound and into the body and cause some issues because that's not where it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be residing on skin. So we did see some Staph aureus. Again, though, it was difficult to say if it was exactly what was going on with this animal just because it could have been a skin contaminant. Under histology, we were able to see that there wasn't, in fact, inflammation. There was some red. Let me say that again. There was some white blood cells that at the site, and there was also some bacteria. Now, the bacteria, once it was gram stain, which is a stain that is able to tell us whether or not bacteria is gram positive or gram negative, which is something that we use to be able to determine what kind of bacteria is there. And sometimes it's also very, in a case of an animal that's already alive, it's sometimes very beneficial to know what type of bacteria, gram positive or negative, so we can treat it. So when we stained it, it came back not the right stain. Staph aureus is purple, which means that it's gram positive, and it's also cocci, so they're round bacteria that are purple. When we looked at histology, the bacteria was more of a oval shape, and it was pink, which is negative. So there was a little bit of confusion as to, maybe the Staph aureus that we grew was more of a skin contaminant, and it kind of overpowered maybe the actual pathogen that was in there. It wasn't very diagnostic. And in the end, we kind of went with just a general bumblefoot, and the owl's condition was quite poor. It had been sick for a while, and potentially having its feet, his talons like that, it probably would have had some issues grasping onto its prey while it was hunting. So in general, there might have been some septicemia, which means that maybe the pathogen did get into the blood and made it sicker. It was quite difficult to really diagnose, and the thing is, it's almost impossible. It is impossible to do blood work on an animal that has died and has been frozen. Unless you actually see the animal die right then and there and take the blood. A lot of the different blood variables are going to be completely off after an animal dies. So in this case, we did go with emaciation, and there was photodermatitis of potentially Staph aureus, of another pathogen may be involved as well. We weren't sure what the laceration had been from. It is possible that it had been from a porcupine, from a thorn, anything like that. So it was interesting for sure to see it. However, it was an isolated incident. It's something that you can see once in a while in birds. And if a bird comes in into a veterinary hospital, bumblefoot is treatable. It's something that would be a bit challenging with wildlife, but it is treatable, and I've heard of animals doing okay and then being released afterwards. So that's case one, part one of the bird pathology from the summer. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comments below. And I'll see you for part 2, where I'm going to talk about Avitrol poisoning in pigeons. So that is kind of a part welfare, part pathology, part a little bit of public awareness as well. So if you're interested in that, and then part 3, I'm going to talk about a parasite called trichomoniasis, and that's going to be in finches. If you're interested in that, that's going to be part 3. So stay tuned, and I will see you next time.